just love the automotive business and love to give back. And here I am many years later, just still loving what I do. I've adhered to many of these standards myself all over the auto industry, but they're SMART goals. So they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based to understand what you need to impact to increase that KPI. All of these processes build upon each other, and that's allowed us to grow, expand, to make a success.
Thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the Lift Your Shop podcast. I'm Kelsey Alexson with Lift Auto Repair Marketing, and today we have an amazing guest. We have Jennifer Hulbert with Service Plus Automotive in Calcium, New York. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're really excited, obviously, learn more about your expertise and everything, especially in KPIs, as well as I know we're going to take a deep dive into today. But in terms of your story, how you guys started in the automotive industry, where did things begin for you?
Sure. So my dad actually started the business in 1992. I joined in 2001 when we moved into the building that we are in now. So we went from a 3-bay old gas station to a 12-bay, technically with flat stalls, the building that we're in now, and knew that growing the company, that's not something that he could do by himself. So I've joined in 2001. My dad semi-retired in 2008 and is pretty much retired at this point now. So I've been running the day-to-day business for quite a long time. So we've grown exponentially in sales and staff. We're busting at the seams of our building right now. So thinking of what's the next step, whether it's expansion or multi-locations, or just trying to navigate that with my team right now. So that's kind of my story. I just love the automotive business and love to give back, and here I am many years later, just still loving what I do.
That's absolutely amazing, and I mean, that's quite the growth from 3 bays to 12 bays. And so, tell me a little bit about that journey. I mean, not always do people jump to that extent, or almost increasing double-digit bays at once. Usually, it's kind of a scaled effort. So, what was that sort of like in terms of really exploding in terms of that size?
He was leasing the old shop that we were at, and we actually built the building that we're in now. So we have 6 lifts, 6 flat stalls. So when I say 12 bays, I should probably preface that it's not 12 lifts.
Gotcha.
And knew that, I mean, he was far outgrown that building, wanted to expand into some car sales, which at this point, I never recommend. We've not done car sales for quite a long time for a lot of various reasons. But the piece of property came up for sale. There was nothing on it, so we started absolutely from scratch and built the shop from ground up. We're right next to the Fort Drum military base, and we moved the location to outside of one of the main gates. So traffic flow, ease of getting to us, exposure was a lot better than where we were in the first location.
Very cool, very cool. And obviously, I know you're a big proponent of KPIs and just kind of,
yes.
I think you understand the numbers, and I guess it's just set it up. Why do you feel they're important?
Okay, well, a little more of my background. So I joined a 20 group through R.L. O'Connor and RLO training almost 20 years ago at this point. They were purchased by the Institute for Automotive Business Excellence, and I became a facilitator with the Institute almost 2 years ago. So in coaching auto shop owners, running my own business, if you're not paying attention to the financial numbers and understand them, then you may think, quote unquote, that you're doing well, but when all reality that you're not growing. So not running the business out of what the checking account says and really looking at profitability. You need to do that knowing your different KPIs. And KPIs to me are key performance indicators. So some of the areas that I coach my group members on are gross profits. So understanding the calculation for parts, labor, and total gross profit. We have benchmarks that are fairly aggressive for the auto industry for various good reasons. So knowing what those calculations are and understanding the formula is key to understand what you need to impact to increase that KPI. So for example, labor gross profit is labor sales minus labor cost gives you labor gross profit dollars, and then you can figure the percentage, dividing that back into the labor sales to get your percentage. We're targeting 72 to 74% labor GP, which again is probably the top 1% of the market, but those are the shops that are going to have sustainability and be able to grow and multiply locations or expand their footprint in a current location because they have profitability.
Yes.
So like I said, the gross profits are very important. Also, understanding your expenses and tracking your expenses. So you can be very profitable and bringing in a lot of gross profit dollars, but if you're not paying attention to where it's being spent, and again, having some idea of benchmarks for the expenses is as important as bringing in sales and gross profit dollars. So net profit is where I always start when I start to work with a new client or a new group member, or look at my own internal financial numbers. I start with the net after everything's kind of calculated. We're looking for 20 to 22% net profit, and this includes the owner's salary as a day-to-day function in the business. So most shop owners have a day-to-day role, and we include that day-to-day role or salary estimate in the expenses as well. So it's a true number of what the business actually can do with the staff that's needed, again, for sustainability.
Yep. Absolutely. And so in terms of these, like these percentage benchmarks, like how did you go about coming up with what these numbers kind of should be as you see it as a healthy business?
Okay. Well, again, I came from a group process who had these established.
Okay.
So almost 20 years ago, Bob O'Connor is the one who had set the benchmarks. The Institute has improved upon them from when I had started in that group process, and we're seeing some of those higher numbers because of the technology and the difficulty of running an auto repair shop today. The technology needed, the equipment needed, the investment in your staff that you need, not only having the right staff, but having the right skill set for where they are in their seat in your business, and constantly reinvesting back in the business. So again, I'm not going to take credit for those because I did not set those, but I've adhered to many of these standards myself, and that's allowed us to grow, expand, invest in training, invest in tools, technology, scanners, everything that you need to repair a vehicle today.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you start at, if you had to say like what is your, I guess no, we'll start at gross profit percentage. So I know you mentioned 72 to 74%. So those, I mean, obviously that's a very high gross profit percentage, and then you mentioned top 1% of shops. Mm-hmm. When obviously as people come on board and you're coaching them, they're starting, I assume most of them are not anywhere near there. And so there's obviously a big gap that's going to take place. So what is then the proper course of action in terms of gross profit, of the steps they can start to take, start creeping a little bit closer to there? Because obviously it's not an overnight thing, but
no, it's not.
What are some of the steps as we kind of coach through this of someone that's maybe, hey, yeah, they're at 60% or maybe more, I don't know. Like how would we coach them through it?
Okay, and the 72 to 74% is labor gross profit, not total.
Sorry.
I'll kind of stick to labor. So you will look at the cost, and do you have technicians on a guarantee? Are they hitting some of their production goals, or do they have goals? Mm-hmm. So is a technician selling 8 hours in an 8-hour day, or are they selling and working or doing repairs for 5 hours a day but being paid for 8? So that can positively or negatively affect your labor gross profit. So we look at cost, and we look at the production of the technicians and what their sold hours are. We also look at the sales. We have shops coming in at a very low labor rate. The $100 an hour shops are still there, and we see them coming into our group process or our coaching program fairly often. So structuring the sales process, the labor rate, the effective labor rate, which we can get into a minute because those are two very different things. to look at that process as well. Is, are you structured for a profit labor gross, or a proper labor gross profit? So labor rates come into that. When we talk about effective labor rate, you can post your labor rate, say, at $150 an hour, but if you are doing a multitude of oil services or state inspections that you're not allowed to charge for state inspection purposes. I'm in New York. We have a $21 state mandated inspection cost, and it takes my technician about a half hour of labor time to do that. So that's not anywhere near my labor rate.
Yeah.
So effectively, I'm not collecting my $165 an hour. I'm only effectively collecting, say, 42 in using real numbers for my own shop. So understanding that, yes, you have this group of labor dollars that you're collecting, but compare that to the sold hours that you're paying your technician, that determines what you're effectively collecting per hour. And we see shops, again, I'll go back to the oil service. If you're doing 10, 12 oil services a day, but you're only collecting, $30, $40 in labor time or labor dollars for that, then your labor dollars collected isn't enough to cover your cost. So again, labor gross profit and effective labor rate are two very key points to make sure that you're profitable. So looking at the shop as a total, what is their sales mix? What is their technician skill base? And are the technicians generating enough work out of some of those ROs that are coming in for lower services to build upon them? So the next step, kind of, it all stacks on top of each other. The next step is the DVI in the sales process. So are you thoroughly inspecting vehicles, documenting that information for items for upsale or safety items? Is your sales process thorough enough to estimate all of those repairs? And then how do you communicate that with the customer to get those repairs and get them approved? So when I have some outside industry people talk about the automotive business, and then we start to dive into some of these specific areas, they're like, the amount of information you have to pay attention to is huge. And I'm like, you're correct. We have very many layers to the automotive industry to make us profitable, but all of these processes build upon each other to make a successful shop.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and that's the importance of understanding the numbers. I mean, obviously, the numbers are only as good as they're inputted. So first and foremost, you need to make sure the data is accurate.
Yes.
When the data is accurate, the numbers don't lie in that terms of, like, it takes the emotion out of it, and you're like, yes, you may have, you feel like you run a successful shop, or you feel like, oh no, our shop is not good at all. But then when you look at the numbers, then that truly tells you, like, what it really should be defined as. Where I think that's where a lot of people kind of they get tentative. Well, and like, the numbers at times can be daunting, and they might not give you the answer that you're looking to see. But it's important to at least start diving into these KPIs and
absolutely
the journey. So I'm curious then, in terms of, like, you mentioned, obviously, the state inspections and oil changes, things like that are obviously driving the effective labor rate down. So is there a certain level then that you see, like, oh, that's where then the value of, like, the lube tech comes into play, or anything like that? And again, my questions are going to come from a person that has never run a shop before. So if my question is, I apologize. But I'm trying to, as I go through and understanding numbers and whatnot, is there a certain level then that you're seeing, like, okay, yeah, there's too many of those driving down, say, maybe some of our better technicians and their effective labor rate, and that's why maybe that's when we should maybe invest in a lube tech? Or how does that sort of process look like and work?
Okay, so there's kind of two schools of thought, and mine's kind of right in the middle. I'm going to play Switzerland on this. So you have the school of thought is, if I have my A-level technician, my top technician, doing all of my oil services, the quality of their digital vehicle inspections may be at the highest level. So they're identifying the work that we can use to sell additional repairs. That is your highest cost of technician. So again, it comes down maybe into the sales mix of how many oil services does that technician get in the course of a day to allow him to still have time to do repairs? The lube tech or the general service tech typically in the industry is of a lower knowledge level. And would they be doing as quality of a digital vehicle inspection as an A technician? And are we able to capture the work to upsell for either other technicians or maybe him or herself? So it depends on who you have.
Yeah, definitely.
But it all, in my opinion, it comes down to the sales mix. So if you're scheduling 20 vehicles a day and you're allowing 15 of those vehicles to be oil services, again, your ability to collect that labor is going to be lower because of the nature of that work. Where if you're spreading that out over time and you're doing maybe 8 oil services and then 12 general repair, then your repair dollars can be higher because you're doing larger work on those other services. But the oil services also generate car count. Mm-hmm. So, and we talk about the scheduling and the dispatch being an art, not a science. It changes minute by minute. Sometimes, depending upon, is the tech available to do the work that was just upsold? Are the parts available to get here in a timely fashion to do it today or tomorrow? If we have something that goes awry and you get into a repair and it turns into a much bigger issue, then that can delay the repair getting done. So it's a balancing act and one that I feel great shops have a process for, but it's never anything that's cut and dry every single day, every single repair, because there's so many variables.
That's 100% true. Yeah, I mean, I guess it always comes down to that "it depends" answer. And, I think that you explained it perfectly though, in terms of why it does depend, in terms of like the journey in which you want your shop to take, some of your technicians to take. So yeah, I think that's a very, very effective effective answer as we go through it. And I know you mentioned in terms of like DVIs and in terms of like that process and the size. And so a question that I've heard a lot is in terms of like close ratio and the kind of the expectation of what that should be. I know it's going to be another "it depends" sort of answer, because I think it depends on the quality in which you're estimating, and thus I think will truly give you a proper close ratio. But I mean, let's walk through that in terms of your thoughts, in terms of how your expectation of the DVI, and thus what that creates for a written estimate, and thus the close ratio that you expect from your teams and your.
Okay. So our benchmark for average repair order is $850 through the Institute, and that's what I hold my staff accountable to as well. Mm-hmm. That is built through the DVI and the estimates that are generated. So the quality of the inspection points, or I should say the quantity of inspection points that you have in the DVI matter. Mm-hmm. Are you maintenance focused or not? So are you looking for the fluid maintenance, the tire rotations, the cabin air filters, the air filters, those type of services? And then are you thoroughly visually inspecting? Because that's the key usually with the DVI, it's visual. Are you thoroughly inspecting the whole vehicle? Are the technicians taking good quality pictures, and are they documenting the why? So you can tell a customer all day long that your tie rod end has significant play. Someone who doesn't understand the critical function of a tie rod end won't know why it's needed. So giving the why through the DVI and documenting that from the technician, like if you don't replace this left front outer tie rod end, your steering system could be disconnected from the tire. It's a very large safety issue. So having that amount of detail in the DVI is important, and to make sure you're inspecting the entire vehicle is the first step. Estimating that is the second step, and I use TechMetric in my shop. The average estimate is called the average written repair order, or AWRO. Yep. So we have a goal of $2,500 for the AWRO. So when you talk about a specific close ratio, it depends on what your average estimate is. So shops that are coming in at 1,000 to 1,200 could have a 50-60% close ratio. My shop's around 40% because our average written estimate is so high. So again, it depends on what where your starting track starts. I had a conversation with one of my group members yesterday, and we were talking about once you get above that $2,500 range for general auto repair. I'm not talking about a diesel shop or a large European shop, but for general auto repair, you can get into some customers kind of stepping back and questioning, is my vehicle worth investing that money into? So I think that is a key point, or a key number, that $2,500, because we've seen shops who have been just above that and their close ratios are lower because of the amount of repairs that they're identifying. So again, my goal is 40%. Again, our goal is about $850, $900 for an average repair order and $2,500 for an average written repair order.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so theoretically, if say someone is like, hey, the repair your arrow is going down for the last couple of months, and you're seeing that number, where would then typically be your next steps in terms of like, hey, how do we get that back up? What would your instructions sort of then be?
I would start by doing a deep dive into the DVI process. So was there a technician change? Was there a de-emphasis on doing that DVI process? If all of those stats look good, then I would go to the service advisor. Is the service advisor not estimating all of the repairs, and you can do an RO audit through your management system or some other tool that we have at the Institute called the dashboard. You can utilize that for an RO audit. And if everything kind of looks the same, then we would look at quality of customer. Did your marketing change? And is that bringing a higher or lower quality of customer in? So say a shop does a mass mailer for a very discounted oil service. Well, that's going to bring in that level of customer typically. So did your quality of customer change? And those would be the three areas that I would look at to start off with.
That's awesome. And that is very valuable insight. So hopefully, again, for those that are hopefully continuing to listen at this point, because there's a lot of good data and numbers. I know at times some of these different phrases of KPIs, it goes right over people, like, oh no, another spiel about KPI. But you can see how amazing it can be to like understand certain sections of your business and knowing that, yeah, okay, this is then who I need to go coach and direct, because it's probably on this department or whatever it may be, and you can make real-time changes. Because if not, again, you're basing things off a feeling. You're like,
yes.
I feel like it's that technician, and maybe he just rubbed you the wrong way that morning, and that's why you feel like it's that technician. Or flip side, it's a service advisor, just based on like, oh, they weren't even smiling today. It's like it has to be where it was coming from. And again, we want to look at the numbers and take a step back of what that really could be. So I think, yeah, it's very helpful to be able to know and understand these different elements. So thank you for sharing with us these different KPIs so far.
And numbers don't lie. So that's something that you can track on a consistent basis and have a level playing field of what you're looking at.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned this word once before, but I think I heard the word goal in there. And so I'm curious now, as we go through, like, is it important for you to be transparent with sharing these KPIs also with the technicians or the service advisors, so they have that and you create a goal around that? Or what is the best process, do you think, that kind of helps move the needle here?
I am 100% in agreement with sharing goals with staff and getting your staff involved in setting goals. And when I say goals, and the term is all over the auto industry, but they're SMART goals. So they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So we're setting a goal based on our history, based on our level of sales or performance. So if you go into a shop who has a total gross profit to start off with at 40%, and you say you need to be at 65 tomorrow, that's not a realistic goal. So
Yeah.
taking baby steps to get there. But um, I I set my goals for our shop. Then I get my leadership team involved.
Mhm.
They usually have different ideas and they're higher than mine. And we've been achieving them
That's very
because
nice.
they have some input in that. So we're setting goals as a group. Most of them are from my leadership team with my specific shop. There are some individual, like technician and individual service advisor goals that we talk about, and they say, yes, I see the value of increasing to this level, or, we may be a little too aggressive in an area and have that conversation with that one-on-one employee. But I share everything. So I am very much a spreadsheet geek. And some of my colleagues say I have very complicated spreadsheets. To me, they're not. But I do document everything on a monthly basis, and I share that with the whole staff. It's posted right outside of our main door. They can see things from sales, individual parts and labor GP, and total GP, average repair order, hours per RO, which we haven't talked about, effective labor rate, proficiency of the technicians to make sure that they are working on vehicles enough hours a day to make us profitable. New customer attraction is something that I also track, and then our active customer number to make sure that our marketing is working and to bring in the right customers. So yes, set goals as a team, share that information with your staff. Do I open up my P&L and my balance sheet to my staff? No, but they know that we are structured in a way that if we hit the goals that we've set, that the whole business itself is going to be profitable, because I'm in a mindset of reinvesting in the business. I want to grow. I'm not using this as a cash cow to have a boat and have a house in Florida, and I live in northern New York, so in the wintertime it might be nice to escape,
Yeah.
but I am definitely reinvesting in the business, and they see that. They see the new equipment. They see the trainings that are coming in. We're purchasing a 6th lift soon. We've figured out space to squeeze one more lift in here to be able to accommodate all of our technicians. So yes, your answer or your question originally was, do you set goals and share them? 110%. And those shops who are thinking, ooh, I just don't know if I want to do that, in my opinion, I'll be blunt, you're missing the boat.
Yeah, no, I'm a big firm believer on goals as well. I think probably the podcast I will launch before this one will probably talk all about goals with another individual that I had on here. But in terms of the type of goals for these team members, so the technicians and the writers and whatever, obviously, I'm assuming they're derived from the KPIs that you're setting for the company as a whole, and thus why they fit into that puzzle and how they work. But for the technician, what are some goals and expectations you set for them that then correlate with these KPIs that we've talked about so far?
Okay. I have a sold hour goal per technician that we do track. I don't post that probably as often as we should. We do it weekly, not daily, but we have a sold hour goal, and they're incentivized through their pay as they hit those goals, and they're incentivized if they go over that for additional pay if they exceed the goal. We have a proficiency goal. So again, proficiency is looking at sold hours versus available hours. So the amount that we're billing to a customer versus the amount of time they're in the shop. And I'm looking for at least 100% efficient or proficient. So billing 8 hours a day for 8 hours that they're here. That goes back to efficiency, that they have to be able to turn those repairs under the time that they have sold to the customer. But so those two are for technicians. I don't have any other goals for them. Service advisors, I share our monthly sales goal with them, so they know what target we're looking at for dollars for the month. They have an average repair order goal, and they have a total gross profit % goal.
Okay.
For service advisors.
That's awesome. That's a lot of numbers and a lot of sharing. But yeah, I 100% agree where like that transparency in certain elements of the company really helps like someone do their job better. Like
Hmm.
it helps drive them forward to like where you want them to be driven to. And it isn't quite obviously like there's an element through processes that things become a little bit more hands off in the process. But I think definitely like until you know that they understand the numbers as well, like you can't just assume that's something
Correct.
that's taking place. And so
Yep.
for these goals, do you usually like have a monthly meeting with them, a weekly meeting with people? Like, well, what does that sort of look like in terms of like the delineation?
My leadership team, we meet twice a month, and then the whole team meets once a month.
Okay.
So beginning the end of the fourth quarter, we're setting our goals for the following year. So we're looking at our sales. We're looking at any improvements in their specific goals, and we're setting those then with the leadership team. Then we communicate those to the entire shop and put them on a graph and track them throughout the year. And so far, the last 3 or 4 years, we've just completely went over our goals, which again, I was a little held back in thinking what we could do, and my team's taken us to a whole different level. So very proud of
Yeah,
the staff that I have.
that's super cool, especially like as like the owner, you're seeing other employees take that initiative and like
Hmm.
and they're like, no, we can do better than that. Like, okay, like awesome, sure, let's go ahead and do that then. So that's super cool to kind of be able to be a part of and nurturing that right culture that
Yes.
you have nurtured. So, and there was another KPI I know you mentioned that we haven't talked about yet. It was hours per RO. Like, let's like what is that, and then we'll go into why it's important.
Okay. So hours per RO is the number of sold hours you're selling per repair order. So I'll go back to if something comes into an oil service and you're allowing a technician a half hour for that oil service. If you can build on that RO and you can sell more services, then that technician's working on one vehicle to get 3 or 4 hours worth of work versus maybe 4 or 5 vehicles to get the same amount of sold hours.
Mm.
So vehicles stay on the lift longer.
Yep.
It slows down their amount of time spent test driving, putting the vehicle on and off the lift, doing a digital vehicle inspection because we inspect every vehicle that comes in. And some of that time is slowed down because they're working on that vehicle longer. So that's beneficial because again, we can see we have the need for less car count at that point if we can maximize the repair on one vehicle versus several vehicles in the day.
Okay, yeah, and so like, obviously it's very dependent on time efficiency, and like
Yes.
obviously that's like it's a very fine balance. You don't want them to rush, and so how do you go about increasing that time efficiency that someone should be taking on the given sold hours that they're doing on a vehicle?
So it goes back to the digital vehicle inspection and the sales process. So if you have a dialed in process and a very good sales team that are able to sell, it helps you slow that process down for the technician. So like I said, there's no science behind this. There's no step process for
Yeah.
scheduling, dispatching, but you can have processes in place for the DVI. You can have your sales strategies and the level of knowledge of your staff set to a level that you're going to be able to increase that number. And I tell my group members all of the time, 6 or 7 years ago, I was that shop that was doing 300 repair orders a month at, $200, $300 per repair order. And I had one of my senior members in our group at the time and like, Jennifer, what are you doing? You're running a zoo. And we really started to focus on the DVI process and got some good training for my service advisors.
Mm.
And that has just blown up our average repair order in a good way, to increase that to get us to the level that we are now. So those steps are very much key to not only the profitability, but slowing the process down so you're not working on 6, 7 vehicles a day as one technician. You're working on 2 or 3 vehicles a day, and it just allows the tech to focus on the repairs, to not have to rush, because if they know that they have just one repair order after another, there are going to be steps that are going to be missed.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is you're not able to slow the customer experience down to create that relationship.
Mm.
We hear in the industry all the time that service advisors are salespeople, and I disagree with that. Service advisors are relationship builders. You're not going to have that customer come back to you if they're not comfortable and they don't get the level of care that they think that they should get. So we're advising them on what they need for their vehicle, but we're also creating that relationship. And part of that for us is, I care about you as a customer. I care about your vehicle safety. I want to maximize your budget with your vehicle. And here are some ways that we can do that with maintenance services or some different repairs. So having that hours per hour higher just slows that whole process down if you can get and achieve that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely an interesting strategy in terms of, yeah, it's in the sense it's investing more time in the customer. Yes. Mm-hmm. And in terms of increasing loyalty, right, probably so. And when you acquire an existing customer, it's much cheaper than acquiring a new customer.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's very, very right in terms of the lines and going along to it. And we've been on so many KPIs, and that was just like the top portion of the P&L. And there's the gross and above. We haven't. I know we hit on net and what that percentage should be, but there's a lot of middle ground in between. We don't need to dive deep into those today. That might take us a ton of extra time. But are there any go-tos that you find in sort of that in between the net and the gross, that are like, hey, these are some KPIs that maybe also need to be considered?
Well, if we're looking at total expenses as a percentage of sales, that's where I would start, but you can't have any one expense be rogue either. Mm-hmm. Again, I'll go back to the group process. We have a financial composite that is entered in every month. There are probably 32 expense lines. Each of them have their own benchmark. So making sure that you're within that range, and again, we would need to have a visual for you to completely understand this, but you can't have your office supplies or equipment just blow up in a quarter and still be profitable. So knowing what your expenses are and making sure that they are within a certain line, or your total expenses, our benchmark is 43% of sales. So are you offering benefits to your shop, and are you very generous because you want to retain them, but at too high of a level, either number one for your sales level that you are, or are you giving away the farm to quote unquote retain employees? So that's a little bit of a loaded question because of all of the expenses that you have to monitor, but I would definitely make sure that your total expenses are like 43 or under of your percent of sales.
Perfect. I mean, and that's a great number for people to just sort of visualize and understand. And I know in terms of that data, again, I know we mentioned if the data is not accurate, it doesn't really matter what we're looking at. Like, these numbers are just going to lead you astray in terms of you're thinking you're going this way, but really, like, then at the end of the day, that's not what's happening. So in terms of just being able to trust the data, like how did you go about creating a process that you're like, yeah, the numbers that are going in are accurate, and thus how I can make good business decisions from there?
So I have our SMS system, so our shop management system. I've been scared to use back office, and I'll have some people who know me well or just shake their head and thinking, why are you still scared to use a very good tool? I still do a daily journal entry from TechMetric into QuickBooks for my sales. Oh. And back office can automate that for me. And believe me, I'm looking seriously into it, as my time at the shop is shrunk because of my position with the Institute. So I feel very confident that my sales in TechMetric are correct because it's what's being billed to customers. It's the funds that are coming in for payments. QuickBooks is what I use for my accounting system. So that's where all of my expenses are paid, and setting up a very thorough P&L classification for your expenses as well as sales and cost of sales. So each of my sales and cost of sales have their own line. So I have labor sales going into a labor sales category. I have cost of labor going into a cost of sales. Same with parts, sublet, tires, towing, shop supplies, environmental fees. And then when you are paying bills and recording checks, making sure that they're going to the proper expense account, and then you can trust your P&L. You know where every cent is going. But it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you have good data and good accounting practices going into QuickBooks, then you can trust that those numbers are correct and there are no variations for that. So it's setting up whether you do it, which I do, you have an internal person like a bookkeeper, internally or externally, but making sure that level of detail is going into the system correctly is so important.
Yes, I 100% agree, because that again, like, if you can't trust your P&L, then what can you really trust with what's going on in the business? So you want to make sure that first and foremost, that data entry to the P&L is happening accurately. And then from there, obviously, then we can definitely drill into these KPIs and how you can maximize the potential of your business and really send the ship just humming along in that direction that you want to go. So this has been super valuable insights and information for everyone. And then as just a one extra step, how often should these KPIs and P&L, how often do you review it? How often should they be reviewed in your opinion?
I would say monthly. So our composite, and I still do a composite for myself on a monthly basis. So after all of the reconciliations are done, after the monthly bills have been recorded, then your P&L is correct. So by the end of the next month, you should have a pretty good idea of where you're coming in. If you don't have something like the group composite, then you can go off of your P&L. QuickBooks has some fantastic reports that you can change things into percentage. You can do some calculations yourself. You can look at the dollars and say, oh, that's a healthy net profit, because that's how a P&L works.
Yeah.
Is the very bottom line is your net profit. So I would definitely say monthly, if possible, quarterly, if not monthly. And in my opinion, I don't think people should go past quarterly, because you're not going to catch trends unless you're looking at it on a regular basis. And we hear this with people coming in like, oh, the year started off great, and then I didn't look at anything, and I got to the end of the year and my expenses completely blew up because I wasn't focused on them. So in an owner's job description, in my opinion, that should be something you should have tasked to you on a monthly basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, as uncomfortable as it may be for some people to look at it for the first time, understanding it changes your business. And eventually, obviously, we're all selling a business to someone, whether it be someone in the family, someone external, whatever it may be. You're selling it to someone, so you want to get the most out of it that you can, and build the right structure for also whoever you're handing it off to. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely the real at the end of the day. And I think all these elements that you spoke of today definitely only help assist in making sure that these things happen. So Jennifer, thank you so much for all this valuable insights and information that you shared with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've enjoyed it.
And so one thing that I would love to get from you in terms of a book recommendation, what is your top book for any owner that is like, you know what, I think you should read this book and it will definitely help you run your business better? What would that book be?
I actually have two, if that's okay. So the life-changing book for me was Traction by Gino Wickman. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, I think it's chapter 3 or 4 is Letting Go of the Vine. And I had in my head that I could do the roles of everyone but a technician. I am not a technician, but I could do the service advisor role. I could do the accounting role. I could do the marketing role. I could do the owner role much better than bringing anybody else in from the outside.
Uh-huh.
And that was not true. Since I've surrounded myself with people smarter than I am, our business has grown significantly. So that chapter of that book specifically has been a life-changing, ideology for me. Traction also gave me a roadmap of this is how to set up a team. This is how to start to discuss culture. Having a scorecard that you're looking at on a weekly or at least a monthly basis. So Traction by Gino Wickman is my number one life-changing book. My second one is Inspiring Accountability in the Workplace by Ilana Noel. And this was introduced to me from my co-facilitator, Aaron Woods. And it goes in the psychology about communicating with your team and having the dreaded performance evaluations. So not necessarily focusing on their individual daily tasks or whether they're doing, a good job or a bad job, but what is standing in their way for getting to that next level or getting to that next goal. And I'm not an expert in this area, but the psychology and the chemicals in your brain, just by using certain terms, change the outcome of a conversation and usually turns it into a positive. So that's a new book for me in the last year, and I've had great conversations with my staff because of it.
Awesome. Well, those are two amazing shares. Thank you so much, Jennifer, again, for being on with us today. For those that maybe want to reach out to you, and if they have questions and they're like, what, can you help me look at the P&L? What would be the best way to contact you?
I would say through the Institute. My email is jennifer@wearetheinstitute.com. Be more than happy to answer some questions. Diving into financials can be a daunting task if that's not your background, but I'm more than happy to help. And I love the automotive industry. I love that people are trying to improve themselves. So again, that's why I went from not only a shop owner, but also to a coach and a facilitator, because we're making the industry better.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, again, thank you, Jennifer, so much for being with us today and sharing so many valuable insights with us. Thank you, those that are watching and listening still. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do so. But I'm Kelsey Alshaw, Lift Auditor Marketing. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thanks, Kelsey.